So, if you're learning Spanish, you've definitely had that moment, right? That feeling of pure frustration where a rule makes absolutely no sense or a sentence that sounds perfect in English just completely falls apart in Spanish. Well, this explainer is all about turning that confusion into a real aha moment. We're going to help you look past that direct, word-for-word translation and start seeing the language's own beautiful internal logic.
All right, let's kick things off with one of the most common and, let's be honest, sometimes embarrassing hurdles, the false friend. You know these words. They look so familiar, like a buddy from English, but trust me, they can lead you down a very, very wrong path.
Oh, we've all been there. You pull out a word from your vocabulary list feeling super confident and suddenly all eyes are on you, and not in a good way. Yep, you've just walked face first into the false friend trap. It's practically a rite of passage for every single Spanish student.
Okay, so here's a classic example. In Spain, the word coger is completely harmless. It's an everyday verb. You'd say, voy a coger el tren, I'm going to take the train, without even thinking about it. But if you say that same sentence in Mexico or Argentina, you are going to get some seriously raised eyebrows. Why? Because there, it's a pretty vulgar slang term.
Now, it might seem funny, and yeah, it kind of is, but it really shows you how high the stakes can be. Picking the right word for the right country can totally change the meaning, and definitely the reception of what you're trying to say. It is all a game of context.
And listen, this isn't just a one-off thing. The word concha is another perfect and kind of wild example. Depending on where you are in the world, you could be talking about a seashell, a delicious sweet pastry, or something you really don't want to say in polite company in Argentina. So the takeaway here is simple but crucial. Context is everything.
This whole thing brings up a bigger question, right? Why does this even happen? How can a single language have so many of these little regional landmines? To get it, we really need to understand how Spanish grew into a language of many, many different worlds.
You have to remember, language never just sits still. After Spanish spread out from Spain centuries ago, it started evolving on totally separate parallel tracks. It bumped into and mixed with hundreds of indigenous and African languages, which created these amazing local flavors. Slang, social rules, and even names for new technologies all grew up differently depending on where you were.
So here's the big idea for this section. The thing I really want you to remember. These differences, they're not mistakes. They're not bugs in the system. They are features. They are the incredible, fascinating result of centuries of history, culture, and human connection stretching all across the globe. It's what makes Spanish so unbelievably rich.
All right, let's switch gears a bit. We're going to go from vocabulary to a little piece of grammar that trips up so many people, that tiny two-letter word se. Now, instead of thinking of it as this confusing problem, I want you to start seeing it as a powerful multi-purpose tool, kind of like a Swiss Army knife for your Spanish sentences.
We're going to break down the 4 main jobs this little word does. We'll see how it bounces actions back on the person doing them, how it smooths out tricky-sounding sentences, how it makes these big, general statements, and even how it can subtly get you out of trouble. Let's take them one by one.
First up, we have what's called the pronominal se, which you often see with reflexive verbs. This is basically where the person doing the action is also the person receiving the action. So in this example, he is the one going to bed, and himself is the one being put to bed. The action just circles right back to the start. Next, se plays the role of a problem solver, especially for our tongues. Spanish really doesn't like that clunky sound of les los. I mean, just try saying that a few times fast. It's awkward, right? So to make it all flow way better, the language just cleverly swaps out lis for se, giving you the much, much smoother se los di. It's just a simple, really elegant fix.
Now this one is super, super useful. The impersonal se is what you use when you're talking about people in general, without pointing to anyone specific. You've probably seen signs that say, se habla español. It doesn't mean some guy named Se speaks Spanish. It means Spanish is spoken here, by people.
And finally, my absolute favorite, the passive se. This is a genius move for getting out of trouble. Instead of saying, I forgot the tickets, which sounds like it's 100% your fault, you can say, se me olvidaron las entradas. In this phrasing, the tickets are kind of the subject. They forgot themselves, and this unfortunate thing just happened to you. It totally softens the blow and implies, hey, it was an accident. Okay, so we've dug into regional words and a superpowered grammar tool. Now let's bring it all together to tackle the single biggest mistake that almost every single learner makes, translating word for word from English.
This quote from a Reddit forum just nails it perfectly.
A learner was asking why Spanish phrases things in a way that seems totally weird from an English point of view, and a user gave this simple but actually really profound answer. It's a different language. It has a different system. And here is the exact puzzle that started that whole discussion. In English, we ask, "What is your name?" It's a question about a thing, right? A noun. So naturally, learners try to translate that straight across to ¿Qué te llamas? But, as we all learn, the right way is ¿Cómo te llamas?, which literally means how do you call yourself? So, why how? Why not what?
Well, the answer has been hiding in plain sight this entire time, in a phrase every single one of us learns on day one. It's the key that unlocks everything we've been talking about. Look familiar?
Did you spot it? That little C right there? That's the impersonal C we were just talking about. The phrase literally asks, how does one say this? It's asking for the method, the process of how you express something. And this shows a really deep, subtle difference. Spanish often cares less about what a thing is and more about how a thing is said or called. And that's the key to its logic.
So, this brings us to our final and honestly, the most important idea of all. Once you really get these concepts, you can make this huge, fundamental shift in how you even approach the language. Look, the goal isn't to cram Spanish words into English-shaped sentences. It's to stop fighting, to stop translating, and just start working inside the beautiful, consistent, and, yeah, elegant logic of Spanish itself. You have to learn to think in the language.
And I'll just leave you with this one last question to chew on. What if learning a language isn't just about sticking new labels on your old ideas? What if it's about discovering an entirely new way to structure thought itself? Because that is when the real journey begins.